You know, on other nights here, they have something called Writers with Drinks, and the host is Charlie Jane Anders. It says here, she defiles this space monthly with the Writers with Drinks literary orgy. I'm not sure if that's like sort of menstruation envy or what. Charlie Jane Anders blogs at io9.com. She wrote the novel Choir Boy and co-edited an anthology, She's Such a Geek. And she's just enormously talented, and it will become obvious. Charlie Anders. Charlie Jane Anders.
Hey, thanks for coming out, guys. I'm going to read some work in progress, because I want to read something new for LitPunk. The story's called Attorney. I asked my only friend for a referral to the world's most bloodthirsty attorney. Mr. Curtis had dry gray hair and more nose than chin. I want to sue everybody who's ever dicked me around, I told him. He wanted me to name all the defendants, but that would take forever. Plus, we would lose the element of surprise. Can't we just make it a class action suit? Like, sue them all as a class? I asked. Mr. Curtis said, no. Then, maybe. Then, yes. The suit of me versus everybody who's ever dicked me around, CV 2008-01830, set legal precedent forever. It took 20 years to issue all the subpoenas, during which time the class kept growing exponentially. And then jury selection was a haystack, because every potential juror was either a defendant, or knew a defendant, or had heard of a defendant. Finally, we got the grandest of grand juries, who met in a mountain bunker 1,000 miles underground, and they could only see the defendants and me through a blind haze. Our voices sounded like mud to them. They couldn't tell who I was and whom I was accusing, only the crimes themselves. The awful catalog of dick, wank, 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 endless mistreatment. The litany lasted forever, and the cross-examination another forever. And in the end, they had no choice but to award me maximum damage. I'll be able to retire if I can ever collect. This story's called Glamour. I made a resolution never to leave the house unless I could look as glamorous and put together as you do every time I see you out in public. 3 weeks later, I left the house nearly starving to death. It's your fault, you psycho bitch! This story is called A History of the Internet. It started out with a girl named Tammy who said she knew where Shasha and I could score some acid. Tammy had a skateboard that she carried around everywhere, but it took us like 3 hours to realize Tammy didn't know how to skateboard at all. She just identified as a skate punk. She had the hair and the arm warmers and the septum piercing with a chain that she said went all the way down and connected to her clit ring. Anyway, Tammy said she knew a girl who knew a whole bunch of girls who had a lab. Tammy said it was an internet thing, so Shasha and I were cracking jokes about alt sex fetish, tentacle porn on acid, and www.drugs.com. And Shasha and I followed Tammy around for 5 hours, including watching her shoplift bath bombs at the Bath and Beauty store, and finally she led us to the Web Dudes with 2 zeros 1.0 conference, which was in a giant warehouse with a skylight. Do you know the Warehouse with a Skylight song? Neither do I. Anyway, one guy had a flamethrower, another guy was using it to light a humongous spliff with the face of J.R. Bob Dobbs. There were all these naked girls doing cartwheels, which, whatever, Burning Man. But then a guy jumped in our face and he started telling us about his website, www.IEatYourAfterbirth.com, which turned out to be a band he wanted to start, but it was easier to start a website than a band, unless you had a drum machine or there were DDoS attacks. And everybody else had a site too, like the girl who posted pictures of naked British men smiling, cropped, so you could only see their teeth and their penises, and it was called www.britishtethandpenises.org because it was non-profit. So Shasha and I started saying, hey, yeah, we have a website too. We just made it up, and we kept changing the URL around every time we told somebody, and sometimes it was www.nasalsex.net, and sometimes it was www.no-not-the-hair.edu because it was like the University of Hair Pulling, and sometimes it was www.bucketofthumbs.com, and by the time we found out there wasn't actually any acid, just blinking lights and NLP, which is lame. Some guy bought all of those URLs for us in exchange for a teledildonic lap dance, which never do those. They suck. We ended up with a whole network of sites because that guy bought us a URL, and 5 years later, we were huffing Provigil to keep generating content for all those sites, and the nasal sex fetishists were mad at us because our site wasn't a nasal sex one-stop shop anymore. We had to blackmail people sexually to write articles for our sites, which is harder work than you would think. Blackmail is not a one-time thing. Blackmail is a dark flower that requires constant tending. And then everybody said it was all about blogs these days, so we had to blackmail people sexually to keep upgrading our WordPress so that people wouldn't hack it. It got fancier and fancier, and all the people at Hairpulling University wanted to socially network, and all the thumb bucketers wanted to twerp us. And finally, we were in a hot tub with ICANN, and people were talking about how the next thing was the internet of bad follow-through, which was where packet loss was the part of the concept. And then the king of ICANN said, as long as all of us there stayed in the hot tub forever, we would never get any older because of the power of ICANN. So we stayed, and 1,000 years passed, and we had to blackmail people sexually to bring us food and Orangina martinis. And finally, we got out of the hot tub in the year 3007 because the internet was coming to an end. And that meant that ICANN's special eternal youth protection was wearing off, and plus we were getting all pruny. So the last day of the internet, everybody was celebrating. They had their faces covered, but they were going around naked from the waist down, and we wanted to know why. They were so happy the internet was dying anyway. And they said, it was because, shh, shut up in the back, bitches. Oh yeah, the last day of the internet, everybody celebrated by covering their faces, but going around naked from the waist down, and we wanted to know why they were so happy the internet was dying anyway. And they said it was because the internet had gotten cyber rabies in 2937, and started stealing everybody's identity. So the internet was everybody, and nobody was anybody, and nobody had any identity anymore, and now they could finally be people again. But that meant no more nasalsex.net, which felt like a huge achievement by this time. 1,000 years of nasal sex on the internet. Now deleted forever, but at least we finally scored some acid. Thanks.
A theme is developing.